Welcome to Parent Boss Leader, the podcast where we explore leadership and innovation in the staffing industry. Brought to you by ATR International, I'm Laura Reinhardt-Munson, an experienced staffing executive and a multitasking busy modern mom, sharing insights to help you lead and empower your team. Tune in, subscribe, and elevate your leadership because building a great team starts with great insight.
Hello and welcome back to the show, an interactive podcast where we interview leaders across industries about their incredible stories. Some guests are parents, some are not. My name is Laura Munson, your host, and I'm also the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at ATR International, a premier staffing firm based in Santa Clara, California. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more engaging conversations with industry leaders. Today, we're excited to have an amazing guest, Ashley Wilson, and she'll share her experiences and advice on navigating pregnancy while interviewing and planning for maternity leave. Ashley is a mother of 2 young children born during the pandemic, offers best practices for expectant mothers in the job market, and valuable insights for employers on accommodating maternity leave. We'll also discuss the crucial role of staffing agencies in providing temporary support during such transitions. Ashley, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. So, can you share a little bit about your experience of being pregnant while interviewing for a job? What are some of the challenges that you personally faced?
Yes, so being pregnant while interviewing has to be like another level of stress while interviewing. So I had to interview for a job while I was pregnant with my second child because I had been laid off at the end of my maternity leave with my first. And so my children are only 15 months apart roughly. And so it was kind of a back-to-back situation. I was early in my pregnancy in that I had not disclosed to most family or friends yet. So for me, I certainly wasn't about to go tell an employer the news before telling the people closest to me. And so the process of interviewing was a little challenging in that we were in the pandemic. We were all working remote, roles were remote. The nice thing about that was you get to hide all things neck down during
Yeah.
your interview process. You're not going in person. And so it was sort of an easier thing to hide from that perspective. However, just nerve-wracking thinking, do I tell them or do I don't? And so I took every interview individually in deciding whether I would say something or not. And for the most part, I erred on the side of, I'm not telling my family, so why would I tell this place? Like, I'm just not ready. And
Yeah.
that's where I was for most of my interview process, is that I'm not ready. And then when I got in a little bit deeper with second, third, fourth round interviews, the feeling of, okay, but I'm going to have to tell them in like 3 months or something,
Yeah.
that just weighed on me really heavily
Yeah.
because I'm an incredibly honest, responsible individual, and I didn't want to come across as lying or, you
Yeah.
have all these fears about it, but you also have the fear that you're not even going to get the offer if they know. And you're also going in thinking, I need a job, which means I need maternity coverage and paid leave. I need all these things from you, and you don't necessarily know it yet, but
Yeah.
without it, I'm really in a troublesome spot. And so my decision was to not say anything, and I fully support people in making whatever decision feels comfortable. But for me, I wish that I had been able to take that weight off myself and say it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hot topic. And there's so many women who this will resonate with. What do I say? Do I say something or not say something? I want to be honest, but I could be shooting myself in the foot. It's a dilemma. And I think your answer is quite honest, saying really it's case by case. What do you feel best with? So based on your own experience in this situation, what advice would you give to individuals who are pregnant and in the job market? What are some of the best practices to use during interviews? Because now you're in the talent world as well. and you've seen it come up. Like, what advice would you give those people?
You know, I think this goes for not only women who are expecting, but for people who are awaiting news that they've been selected for an adoption to come through.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
can be male or female. Um, any of those kinds of cases, I think it's really important to consider. It's also a situation where you might be in the middle of receiving IVF treatment of some kind, find yourself without a job and be looking for that next job that has that,
Yeah.
And so these are all really delicate and personal situations, but our employer has a responsibility in them. And whether or not that just checks the box of providing benefits for employees is fine. But part of the process that we navigate is, how do we find out what their benefits are? And so I
Yeah.
think for employers, if they could just be so kind as to put that out there for the world to read, because we don't want to be nosing around through it while we're making a decision to go with one company over another. And that might be really critical time in our lives where we need to.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I think employers really need to take responsibility for. And that would be really useful to all these different parties. But another would be, if you're out there and you're interviewing, I think do a little comparison game to make yourself feel more satisfied with whatever your choice is. And what I mean by that is, um, I was a few months pregnant and interviewing.
Mhm.
My husband lost his job while we were pregnant and he was interviewing with our first. Did he tell
Wow.
them? Was he
Yeah.
worried? Was he like,
It-
oh, I have a child on the. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like, what are other people making decisions for? Do other people tell, their employers to be that they know that they're going to be needing some time off because their parents are on their way to being terminally ill?
Yeah.
And so it's all these things that it's like, it's a decision, but there are very similar ones that other people have to make and take very differently. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure on us, but I don't necessarily think that we need to have that.
Yeah. No, I think it's really good advice. And it's kind of interesting even hearing, does your husband share, oh, I have a child on the way? It's sort of, why wouldn't you? It's like it's a different world, different situation. You had shared with me an interesting story. You had an unexpected and challenging situation when you went into labor earlier than you had expected. Can you tell us a little bit about that situation and how you handled it with work?
Yes. So with that role, I ended up getting all the routine checks that you do as a pregnant person, and thousands of them, it feels. And I remember particularly being just miserable toward the end of that pregnancy, which can happen. My first was a breeze. My second, I was like, this is the worst thing in the world,
Mhm.
and dying to be done. And one day I went to a routine appointment and they were like, oh, we just want to send you over here to the hospital to go check, get yourself checked out a little more. And I just casually thought that was maybe a thing they do. And
Yeah.
then when they ever told me, like, here, why don't you lay down in bed and get yourself some ice chips? And I'm like, okay, great. And
Else?
I'm like,
Okay.
oh, I'm getting catered to today. I'm just at a doctor's appointment. All of a sudden, they're like, you know what? We're gonna keep you, let you have this baby. And it was so early that I was in shock. And I was like,
Wow.
I didn't want to be too,
Yeah.
unconcerned to the doctor. So internally, like fireworks went off, and I was like,
Yeah.
yes, let's do this, get this
Yeah.
baby out of me. But
Yeah.
to them, I'm like, oh wow, okay, is everything all right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but what I wasn't ready for was work. I mean, I had not been able to put together an exit plan. I had not been able to put together transition plans for all the things I was doing and write down what was in flight. It was on my calendar to do 2 weeks from then. And so what ended up happening is that when I had to tell my employer that I was in this situation where I was about to go into maternity leave very early, um, their panic was bigger than mine. And they said, oh my gosh, you've got to explain X, Y, and Z and all of these things. And they weren't ready in any way. And actually had me on my laptop in the labor and delivery room on a meeting to go through things that needed to be completed and how to do them and where, where documentation was and where to find this and who the contact is here. And
Yeah.
like a whole nother level of work while you're
Yeah.
and
That sounds so intense.
it wasn't a reaction I was expecting, okay? It wasn't the, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, take care of yourself, go ahead. It was more selfish and you've got to help me out. What do I do? And I'm
Yeah.
like, what do you do? I'm literally laying down about to give birth and you want me to get on a call. And that's where we went. And that's
Yeah.
what happened. And
Yeah.
so we're going to put that on the what not to do list in case anyone's wondering.
Yes. So conversely, it's challenging because it's so hard. It's like I think we can relate to both sides. On one hand, mother is giving birth, going through anything with work as you're breathing through contractions. It's just it's not the time.
Nope.
But then also there's an empathy. The employer is like, oh my gosh, we were like, you're our only option. We need help.
Yeah.
So what strategies would you recommend for expectant mothers to effectively plan for maternity leave, how they can approach the subject with their employers? So we don't have that.
Right. And I think that it's really important to think about this from another perspective, which is that what was it? Gartner research. According to Gartner research in 2024, 85% of people managers had not had any training to become people managers. And so those who had the training had approximately 4 hours of training under their belt to be a people manager, which isn't much.
It's funny. It's
4
almost
hours
humorous.
is maybe long enough to go through like the employee handbook,
Hmm.
one by one. I don't know.
Hmm.
To learn how to approve time cards. I'm not sure what that gave them, but
Yeah.
my point is, I recently sat through a manager training and in one of our peer one-on-ones learned that this manager had not disclosed to his team of 20 for years that he found out late in life that he has Asperger's syndrome. And so
Um,
when his employees have life things going on, he cannot recognize what kind of response is
oh,
appropriate.
yeah,
And it had me thinking that, you know what, that particular employer had no experience with
yeah,
maternity, paternity, any kind of
yeah,
childbearing person in their lives. And so
yeah,
the fact that I could have gone into pregnancy early was
yeah,
never something that crossed their mind. And so I think it's important to make sure when you are talking to your employer, bring all of
yeah,
that up. Say, I hear that people go into labor early and that can be as early as 7 months and still,
yeah,
happen. Why don't we start putting together a plan so we have it at 6 months and
mhm,
really explain to them why you want to start so early and
yeah,
what the benefit is, and it's a just in case,
yeah,
and then save that end of the moment planning to just really say, here's where my status is with what I'm leaving you and that kind of a thing.
mhm,
And I also think it's just so important to be a manager and ask those questions. How are you feeling? Maybe you don't
yeah,
know that you're about to go into labor, but
yeah,
just asking like, how are you feeling? Is there anything that we can do to kind of make this easier? I know you're getting toward the end of your pregnancy. Do you want to start rolling things over to us so we can get our feet wet and learn more about what you're doing and how support's going to look when you're not there?
mhm,
Those kinds of things are important. And starting, if you're going to a contractor to fulfill that role while someone's absent,
yeah,
that contractor role needs to be hired early, not
mhm,
at the week before. The hiring process needs to be accounted for, and then
yeah,
the transition of data and knowledge needs to be accounted for.
yeah. I think this is such good information you're sharing. Even hearing the statistics about people becoming people leaders, so few actually are trained. I think it's sort of a miss. A lot of employers just say, oh, maybe you're good with people and you're good at your job. You should be a leader, but don't receive any formal training. Every situation that comes up is that manager's first rodeo. So this is
Exactly.
really great advice that you're sharing and how to interact with people who are going to have a baby soon. Like be prepared is kind of the name of the game. even as early as you find out, start asking questions and start coming up with a plan. I think that's great. So, wanted to talk a little bit about the role of the staffing industry. How important is it for companies to work with staffing agencies to fill temporary assignments during the maternity leaves? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think it takes the stress off of everybody during that kind of a situation. So no matter what the kind of leave is, if you know about it in advance and you can plan to put somebody in that seat, um, and for longer than maybe just if it's in the US, let's say it's 6 months
Yeah.
and you're there for a month early and a month late. That's really
Hmm.
helpful and it's really pivotal in making everyone successful and making the team that you're about to leave a hole in for a little while
Hmm.
feel like
Hmm.
they're not overburdened and really keep things moving quickly. And I think staffing suppliers are critical in that. And they really are able to find the best talent that we need to fill those seats and for that small period of time. And a lot of times we don't know what we're gonna feel like after have given birth and once we have a child in our lives. A lot of people
Yeah.
say, "Oh, life's so different now. I never knew this was coming, but I'm not going back to work." And then
Yeah.
that person all of a sudden has a full-time opportunity and they've been doing the role for 6 months.
Mhm.
Um, so it's really important, and it's really something that I think that all companies should look at building into their practices around maternity or paternity leave.
Yeah, I think really, really good insight there. I like the part about really planning for overlap. Because if it's planned for the last minute, that robust knowledge transfer can't be there. And then the company's up against your situation in the labor maternity ward on your laptop, trying to think through everything possible to help them. So even budgeting a little extra to have that really makes sense in the long run. And it could be an opportunity for whatever contractors in the role to go full time because having kids does change a person's life. Some people are in a situation where they can come right back. Others really want to choose their children for a while. So I think it's good, practical, real advice you give. Wanted to ask about your experience with pregnancy and maternity leave influencing you on your approach to work and life. What lessons have you learned through all of this? And what would you like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I think the biggest lesson is really that there's a huge need to inflict humanity in the manager training process, and particularly around benefits. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking of all benefits related to parenting. So everything from IVF to adoption policies to going through maternity or paternity leave. And I think one of the things that I found that was really interesting to me was another parent who was going through interviewing while knowing that they were about to adopt and they were
Wow.
about to need this time off,
Yeah.
and how stressful that was and how similar that was to my own experience of being
Mhm.
pregnant while interviewing. Um, I found somebody who did this really interesting, almost like a white paper that they posted on LinkedIn for the world to see. And I love it. It has kind of the 101s of what to expect when you're going through adoption. And I
Mhm.
read it and I was really intrigued because I know very little. And it turns out people who are looking to adopt know very little. It's one of those daunting experiences where this document was so useful. Her name was Bumi Odamade. And Bumi put together in that a sheet on basically a dictionary for positive adoption language and how to talk positively to your employees who are
Oh,
going through adoption, what to say, what not to say. On the not to say, what to say
wow.
instead, right? And so
Yeah.
there are things that aren't really received well, and that's reality for all these different kinds of things. Nobody wants to go through IVF and be, kind of in the middle of it, trying to hide it while they're doing that, and they're in their workplace and they stand next to somebody in the kitchen who comes in and, tosses their lunch in the fridge and says, "Oh my God, I'm so tired. I think I made peanut butter and jelly, but I don't even know. My kids kept me up." And you're sitting there like, "I'm going through IVF, you."
Yeah.
Can you believe that you just
Yeah.
complained about your children? And, it's the
Yeah.
slightest little things that really get to
Yeah.
you. And it's this time in life when you are so overly sensitive, and it just
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So those are really important things to just, even as a company, like put some thoughts around and how you want to treat these people. Do you have a policy for, let's acknowledge this person's major life event, and you have like a $50 stipend per person to get them a gift card or whatever it might be? And just
Yeah.
how do you want to acknowledge your employees when they go through this life-changing situation? And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be monetary. I had wonderful colleagues put together a baby shower for me virtually, and it was the most ridiculous games and just so silly and fun. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? Like, this isn't my thing, but I appreciate all of you for just being with me and just wanting to
They're
celebrate.
sweet.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just sweet. And so I think that
Mhm.
that's really huge. Another thing is, and this is a terrible situation that my husband went through, is he
Mhm.
was a contractor manager, had a contractor who started late in her pregnancy, was thrilled to have her on, knew she was pregnant, just knew she was like the right person for the job and all of the brains that they needed. And she went through having a stillbirth. And
Oh.
that entire team was like,
Mhm.
where do I get the cliff notes on what to do? This is a crazy
Yeah.
situation. And it's
Yeah.
really, really hard. And so I think just having something that you can use as, a
Yeah.
guide for all of those managers out there that might need it
Yeah.
more than others.
Yeah.
It's not second nature to people.
Yeah. I think it's such good advice. It's such good thoughts. And it's so sad even hearing that situation. I love that the culture of that team was to support and to look up how they want to be good for that person. I love that. That's a good heart. I think overall, kind of summing things up, even if someone's pregnant, going on interviews or in a maternity situation at work, each company's different, aren't they? Like there's different cultures, just like people are all different. So if you are someone who is pregnant going to an interview, it's a great time to interview that company back to see how they respond to your situation. Same way while going through pregnancy within a company. Some companies are absolutely amazing. Others, like you mentioned, are like, what do we do with this? We've never experienced this before. But I think all that's needed is just a little training around it or investment to see how to handle situations. Because at the end of the day, none of us are robots yet. We're people, we're humans, we're
Yes.
connectors. I
I
know.
love that. No, it's so true. We're not, and I think acknowledging that, and that we're no longer showing up to work and just being our work selves. We're our entire self, we're our entire being. And if you want us to perform greatly for you, you really need to do the most you can to acknowledge that. And especially these really life-altering situations that come across once or twice. I don't know a lot of people that are having 9 kids, but they're still out there. But
Yeah.
it's not that often. And I think it's really critical um to take some time to acknowledge that.
Yeah, very true. Ashley, thank you for coming on the show today. It really can be a controversial topic, but really appreciate and respect your transparency and just sharing your honest truth of what you went through in your situation and providing hope to expectant mothers, kind of little tools on how to handle situations, but also powerful nuggets for hiring managers and companies alike on how to interact with either pregnant candidates or those who are pregnant within the job that they're already in. So thank you for inspiring us with much useful guidance as well. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future, Ashley. If people are interested in connecting with you, is LinkedIn the best place to find you?
It sure is. I'm on there.
Perfect. Well, thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you liked what you heard, please like and subscribe for more.